I got to think that most of you like this. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stepping by for the best in discussion, debate, and analysis. Because of me? No, because of you. Best discussion and debate. Leave those comments and questions there in the chat. We've left the call-in line also in the chat. Of course, this is the late night call-in show that we present each and every week. So it's the Monday through Friday show, the college football show, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. Not a great time for many of you who grew up watching us late night. So we have decided a few weeks ago to go late night with all of you once per week. This week, let's go 2 times. So tonight, and then we've got Leanne Herring for the On the Move show, 8:30 Eastern time, and we're taking your calls on Friday night, 8:30 Eastern. Join us for the On the Move show, which focuses on the transfer portal and recruiting, but you can call us about anything concerning college football. But let's get to first things first. And of course, we've got a major shakeup concerning the college football playoff, which first leads me, while I say hi to everyone in the chat, that I will be publishing a newsletter. So some of you old timers may remember this, and I don't believe we've got any in the chat tonight, but some of you old timers, that we had a newsletter that we produced weekly for, I don't know how long, but I got to admit, it was well accepted. People loved it, loved the newsletter, because basically it would be my take on college football for the week on one big topic. It would be a lot of stats, facts, and trends, statistics that you've not seen anywhere else. These are created by myself. I'm not pulling these statistics from anywhere else, but stats, facts, and trends produced by me. And then also, highlights around it in the network in regards to shows and channels and content that you should know about. So I've written a newsletter, and we have released that to a number of email subscribers. And we will also have that available at the voiceofcollegefootball.com. So VOCFB is your place to be, VOCFB.com. And you will have my weekly, what I intend to be a weekly newsletter. Now, some of you know that at times I bite off more than I can chew, but in this case, we'll at least make it a monthly. My intent is weekly newsletter in the off season, certainly a weekly newsletter during the season. So be looking out for that, and you will be able to get that only at vocfb.com unless that is mailed directly to you through email. So I address some of the issues facing our sport. And so this is one right here, the college football playoff. And I think this is a Band-Aid solution. I think that this is not necessarily the end of the world, or do I think that this is a fix? As I stated off the top of this live stream, I believe that for many of you, this is a welcome change to the college football playoff based on what we saw in 2024. I don't necessarily agree with your thoughts. I understand them. I believe that they are valid. It's a valid perspective to want the 4 best teams in the college football, whether you consider those to be the 4 best teams or the 4 teams that earned those buys on the field, not just based on their record or based on a conference championship, but I believe most people, most college football fans, and correct me if I'm wrong, certainly leave your comments there in the chat. We will go through them, and certainly give me a call on this, that you want the 4 best teams, or the 4 teams that earned it. And again, not just based on conference championships, not just based on record, but earned it against the best schedules in the country, the best opponents, that you want to see those 4 teams selected as the teams that receive the bye. I'm not completely sold on that because, number one, I do not trust us to know who the best teams are. We are not omniscient. So I would like an earned process of receiving the buys based on what you earn on the field. We've only been in this system for one season. It's not like this system has failed for 5 or 6 years and something has to change. No, people did not like, most college football fans, it hit them, it hit you in a funny way to see Boise State and Arizona State receive buys. And I understand it. I get it. They were not 2 of the 4 best teams in the country, although Arizona State certainly played like it in their only college football playoff appearance. Also understand that this situation in 2024 and the buys that were earned by Boise State and Arizona State as conference champions, let's understand a lot of nuances to this. Number one, we would rarely see a group of 5 team earn that top 4 spot. So what we witnessed in 2024 is a huge aberration that we would see play out maybe once every 10 years, maybe 15 years. We're not normally going to see a group of 5 champion be ranked higher than a Power 4 champion. So that's number one. So we saw an aberration. Number 2, those were conference champions. And other teams did not earn conference championships. And so many of you are, you're pulling for me hard on this one right now. And many of you are saying, Mark, come on. These teams are not better than Penn State. They're not better than Notre Dame. They're not better than Georgia, Tennessee, and other teams in the SEC and the Big Ten. I'm not debating that. I'm debating that they earned those positions in the top 4, and we only experienced this for one season. And we just experienced a 10-year run in the college football playoff since it started with a 14 playoff in 2014, where we routinely saw blowouts among the very elite of college football. We saw Oklahoma get trounced a number of times. Some of the most embarrassing results in postseason history suffered by the Sooners, giving up 7 touchdowns, not in the game, 7 touchdowns in the first half against LSU, getting trounced by Alabama like it was a 31-0 score before you could blink. Ohio State losing 31-0 to Clemson, and we could go on and on. Michigan State losing 38-0 to Alabama. So these are elite programs, in some cases, getting trounced. Okay, so we went through that for 10 years, the 14 playoff, and it was not perfect, but it was executed just about as well as it could be for a 14 playoff. I had very few issues with the teams that were selected. Now we get to a 12-team playoff. And forget the teams right now that were selected, because we're going to focus on the news of the day, which involves the seedings, and we get a couple calls coming in. We will get to those calls because first I want to actually read the article that that outlines what was decided today. But I will simply say this. We only got one dose of this, and I'm not claiming in any such way that either Arizona State or Boise State were 2 of the 4 best teams in the country. In no possible way was I claiming that. However, Texas might have been the second best team in college football. They were certainly in that argument. Texas, Oregon, Penn State, Notre Dame. One of those teams was the second best team in college football last year. And it might have been Texas. Certainly looked like it when they played Ohio State. They played Ohio State closer than anyone by far. They had the ball at the 1-yard line, down by a touchdown with 3 minutes left. They lost an overtime game in the SEC championship game to Georgia. Texas was probably the second best team in the country. Did you watch them play Arizona State? Arizona State completely acquitted themselves, and Arizona State played a better game against Texas than most of the winning teams in the college football playoff. So Arizona State actually stood up as a Big 12 champion and showed themselves to be equal to the challenge and worthy of a bye. Boise State Yeah, they lost to Penn State by 17 points. Did you watch the game? And again, in light of what we saw for 10 years in this playoff, Boise State was within 17 to 14 in the third quarter. Three times in the second half, they had the ball in the Penn State red zone. No, they didn't convert. And yes, Penn State won the game, and Penn State was decidedly the better team. But Penn State was decidedly the better team against SMU, and Texas was decidedly the better team against Clemson, and on and on and on. And Ohio State was decidedly the better team against everyone. And Ohio State beat Oregon. That was a bloodletting. And Boise State played a competitive. Was it down to the wire? Was it a classic? No. It was a really good football game that was in doubt with 4 or 5 minutes left in the game. So those teams acquitted themselves. I would have just liked to have seen this format play itself out for a few years. We will certainly discuss the college football playoff with all of you tonight. And anything that you would like to discuss concerning anything in college football, but certainly concerning the seeding process. But again, I would have liked to have seen it play out. We have given the committee all this power, and now we are going to give them the power to rank the teams, and then those rankings are going to hold and form the seedings and therefore the buys. Okay, we want to go that route. I have a much better system. I have a much, much, much better system. All right, and then there are people that claim, okay, the 4 top seeds all lost, therefore it's a faulty system. Okay, well, one of them played the best team in the country and might have been the second best team in the country. Of course, I'm talking about Oregon playing Ohio State. Georgia was with a backup quarterback. They were the SEC champion. And all 4 of those teams were underdogs actually in those games. So it was not like these teams were hexed or anything. The games played out as intended. All right, let me get to the article first, and then I will take these calls. This is coming in from Heather Dinich of ESPN. The 12-team CFP will move to a straight seeding model this fall. Now, the one thing I will say right out of the gate is for the average college football fan or the fringe college football fan, this is going to be much more understandable. Do I think that justifies a system? No, but it's a positive in that look at some of the models we've seen about all sorts of crazy semifinal games and conferences that will have 3 seeds and conferences taking on 6 seeds and 4 seeds taking on 5. This will completely confuse even ardent college football fans. So there is, don't let complexity get in the way of success or accomplishment. So usually the best things in life are somewhat simple, especially when they involve sports. We're not splitting the atom here. Some things in life have to be complicated. This does not have to be complicated. So this is a step in the right direction in regards to the average college football fan understanding. Okay, they're the number 4 team in the country. They're the 4 seed. Not they're the number 12 team in the country. They're the 4 seed. What's going on here? How did that happen? So the top 4 seeds come directly from the rankings and get the first round bye. Okay, the 10 commissioners and Notre Dame athletic director Pete Bavacqua, don't get me started on that. Can we invite the Syracuse athletic director or the Kansas State or the Stanford athletic director? Can they show up and represent? This is yeah, don't get me started that this guy has a seat at the table along with conference commissioners of conferences of 18, 16, and 17 teams. who constitute the CFP's management committee, reached the unanimous agreement necessary to make the change. I wonder if it's truly unanimous. This may have been unanimous. Well, no. I don't see how this was unanimous. I do not see how this was unanimous. And I will make a prediction that and we're probably only going to see this for one more year anyway, the 12-team playoff. Then we'll get to 16, and then we'll have a straight draw of no buys, and one plays 16, 2, and 15, and it's going to be a straight tournament, which every team plays the same number of games, and it's just going to involve being a higher seed playing a low seed, which is, you would assume, would be playing the worst teams in the tournament and would be playing at home possibly in the first round, and we will probably, that was a rousing success, playing home games. I think college football fans enjoyed that. I think all of you enjoy that. But there is no way that this was unanimous, truly unanimous. Yeah, they twisted their arm and they officially voted unanimously from the ACC and from the Big 12. But this is taking buys away from those schools. But I know that there's a financial component that is lessening the pain. We all have a responsibility to serve our constituents while also being mindful as to what's best for college football. ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips told ESPN. That's actually stated very well by him, basically saying, I represent the ACC, but I should be looking out for what's best for college football. Now, whether he actually practices that, again, the ACC and the Big 12 have little say in this matter. Today's decision was done in the best interest of the sport. It may not always benefit the ACC, but it was the right decision, and that's a responsibility I take very seriously. So let's say a 16-team playoff does not result. Let's say we go with the 12, because I'm just playing out this theoretically. I guarantee that 90% of these buys are going to be taken by the Big Ten and the SEC. And there's going to be a wondering team from time to time, like at Clemson. A lot of people are really in love with Clemson this year. I don't exactly know why. Maybe I should do a deep dive on Clemson here at some point. But people love Clemson this year. And maybe they would legitimately take a top 4 seed. Maybe they're going to churn out a 12-1 season with an ACC title and a top 4 seed. But otherwise, I don't see too many hopeful teams out there that could legitimately take a top 4 seed. This past season, the 4 highest-ranked conference champions earned the top 4 seeds, regardless of where they were ranked. Now, independent Notre Dame is eligible to earn a first-round bye if the Irish are ranked in the top 4. So that's another interesting caveat here that I don't necessarily like. But it makes sense because we're going to have other non-conference champions finish in the top 4, most likely, from the Big Ten and the SEC. And Notre Dame, again, will only need to play 12 games. All 4 teams that earned a first-round bye in the inaugural 12-team CFP lost their first game. We understand that. The 5 highest-ranked conference champions will still be guaranteed spots in the 12-team field. So we will still have a situation in which most likely this is going to happen, especially with the group of 5 champion, of course. It's rarely going to be a Boise State that's ranked pretty high, fringe top 10, where we're going to see a team that's going to be ranked outside the top 12 in the country, get plucked from number 19 in the country. Number 19, Dan Mullen's UNLV running Rebels from number 19, and going to be jettisoned into the top 12. Quote, after evaluating the first year of the 12-team playoff, the CFP Management Committee felt it was the best interest of the game to make the adjustment. Change will continue to allow guaranteed access to the playoff by rewarding teams for winning their conference championship games. Okay, but it will also allow us to construct a postseason bracket that recognizes the best performance on the field during the entire regular season. I get it. Clemson was not, but Clemson didn't even get a bye last year. But most years, as the ACC champion, they would get a bye. They lost 4 games. They lost 3 games going into the playoff. The group agreed, however, to maintain the $8 million financial commitment to the 4 highest ranked conference champions. Salute to them for at least making the financial commitment there to the teams that earned it out of those leagues that had to play a conference championship game and won said conference championship game. I agree with that. That was the commissioner's way of, at least for this year, holding to the commitment that they have made financially to those teams. There you go. Last year, Mountain West Conference champion Boise State and Big 12 champion Arizona State earned the top 4 seeds, first round buys. Boise State was number 9. They jumped to a number 3 seed. Arizona State was number 12. They jumped to a 4 seed. We would have seen under this new format the top 4 teams in the country. Oregon 1, Georgia 2, Texas 3, Penn State number 4, even though Penn State should not have been number 4. So the committee is going to make stupid moves and they are going to misrank teams as they did last year. Anyway, the CFP's management committee has been contemplating changing the seeding. Some commissioners were hoping to tie the discussion into the bigger consideration of format for 2026 and beyond. No decisions have been made. A lot of discussions, etc. And there we go. All right. To the phone lines. If I can actually click on this. New laptop, folks. What the heck is going on? Here we go. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. We got the real MVP on the line.
Hey, Mark, how are you doing this evening?
I am doing well. Thanks for your patience. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I felt like this is this is only a one-year thing, so at the end of the day, this really doesn't impact the sport for a long period of time, but feels like for the average college football fan, this is a massive win because of the simplification of the process. And in my opinion, the number 1 overall team in the country should have the easiest road to make the national championship game. And last year, that was clearly not the case. It was not the case even before Ohio State decided to turn into the Kansas City Chiefs. So I think we're making it a more equitable system by implementing this change.
Okay, so eliminate the Ohio State situation of them doing exactly what you said and reaching their potential and then going on this run in which they pretty much obliterated everyone. Play that out otherwise. Like, what is going through your mind when you make the statement that you just made about Oregon being the number 1 team in the country, the only undefeated team in the country as a conference champion, how that would have played out to your satisfaction?
Oh, well, they had to play Texas on that side of the bracket just to make the national championship game. So, in my opinion, you had the number 2 or 3, you had the 3 of the top 4 teams in the country, in my opinion, on one side of the bracket. Whereas on the other side of the bracket, as soon as it came out, everybody said how light the Notre Dame, Georgia, Penn State, SMU side was.
So you're going with Oregon, Texas, Ohio State on that side of the bracket?
Those were the 3 best teams.
Well, they turned out to be most likely the 3 best teams.
They were the 3 best teams before even the games were played, those 3 teams. Tennessee and Arizona State, Clemson had absolutely no chance. You could do a round-robin tournament. Those 3 teams would dominate.
Well, I agree with you. However, I don't know that we could come to the conclusion before the CFP that Ohio State objectively was one of the 3 best teams in the country.
Okay. But removing Ohio State, let's remove Ohio State. They still would have had to gone through Texas. Whereas on the other side of the bracket, Penn State, for example, they had to play SMU, Boise State, and Georgia to get to the national championship game. Oregon would have had to play Tennessee, Texas to get there. It's clear Penn State's path is easier.
Well, I typically respect your opinion on this stuff, DeReal. And I do I get your point, but I do think we've got to step back from what actually played out versus how these teams were perceived and also objectively perceived before the tournament started. And Georgia beat Texas twice, and they were the SEC champion.
That is correct, but at the time before the playoff game, we understood Carson Beck went down in the SEC championship game. That has an impact on Georgia. We understood that the only team Texas lost to throughout the entire season was Georgia. So it's not like Texas was even a bad. If you want to say at worst, they're like the fifth best team in the country going into the playoffs. That's fine, but everybody was like, "Oh, that's a very dangerous team who can win it all."
Sure.
Whereas on the bottom half of the bracket, there was only one or maybe two of those teams. Where in the top half of the bracket, there was three of them.
Well, this new system is still not a system like the NCAA basketball tournament where an injury is going to be factored in, or when there was a 4-team playoff that I can imagine the committee, maybe they would say Carson Beck's out, Gunnar Stockton's the quarterback. We're going to drop the SEC champion below a team that they just defeated just because we think that they don't have as good a chance.
Well, based on the NCAA tournament bracket this year, any West Virginia fans in the chat will know Tucker DeVries got injured 8 games into the basketball season, and that was the reason West Virginia didn't make March Madness was because of that injury. And they play 32 games, and they said, sorry, your best player or one of your best players was hurt a quarter of the way through the season, so they got nixed. And a bunch of teams filled in the gap. So injuries are going to be factored in going forward as they should be, in my opinion, in all sports.
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that. And in this case, that would have been a rather tough blow for Georgia to take after defeating a team twice and having what we wouldn't have known at that point to be a drop off at quarterback.
Oh, I understand, but at least the committee would be consistent in this way. They did it in 2023 with the Florida State thing. They did it last year with the they would have done it last year with the Georgia thing. So in my opinion, when determining it, it's a combination of your resume and what you're projected to be, especially if you've got a key guy on your team that's caused you to win so many games out. It's really hard to judge that game, and it's unfair. But Mark, I wanted to ask you about the 16-team playoff as well. I saw Stuart Mandel tweet out that, we can't have anything simple in college football. I assumed, and I'm sure everybody else assumed, we're just going to have 1 through 16. But Mark, that's too simple. So what we're going to have happen, according to what I saw, was we're going to have 13 play 16, and we're going to have 14 play 50 in like a play-in game. And then the winner of those games are going to be slotted into the bracket.
So, okay. That's going to produce 2 winners that are going to be added to the other 12 teams. We got a 14-team field then.
A glorified 14-team field, yeah. I mean, it's like March Madness, how it's 68 teams, but there's a first 4. It's basically the same concept.
No, I get that. I get that part of it, but then you're creating a 14-team field. So then do you have buys again?
Yes.
You've got double buys?
You would have a bye for the top 2 teams in the country.
Well, that is complicated, and I don't necessarily agree with it to an extent. I got to give that some thought because I would think, for as many conversations as I've had with you, that you would understand the reasoning that you're wanting the worst teams in the field to eliminate themselves and have to earn it more than the teams that achieved during the season.
Yeah, I understand that, but at some point, I think we're just outsmarting ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, in the grand scheme of this, it will not matter if the 16 seed upsets the 13 seed or the 15 upsets the 14. It will not matter in any year because the 16 team cannot win the national championship. A 9-3 Big Ten teamer like Illinois or an 8-4 SEC team like Texas A&M cannot win the national championship because they're just not good enough.
Yeah.
Do you think the reason they're doing this is just for we want to see better matchups, closer fought games, and we're trying to build up toward the playoff?
Yeah, they want to rest the best teams in the country and make it even easier for them. And I'm not saying that they didn't earn it for them to advance and for there not to be some silly first round upset, I guess. But to your point, uh, I'm just going to give some hypothetical matchups. I'll take your Illinois example, and I can imagine that they're going to be traveling to Austin, Texas, to play Texas as a 16-1 matchup, and we're gonna have an SMU team going to Columbus to play Ohio State, and we're gonna have those type of matchups. BYU is going to go to Athens to play Georgia, and we're going to have those kind of matchups. Where is an upset possible? Of course, it's possible, but with those kind of stakes, I think we're going to go back to seeing some pretty excessive routes in the first round.
Oh yeah, I would expect a very heavily majority of the games to be absolute complete blowouts.
Maybe they want to try to somewhat avoid that, so they're going to give the best teams in the country the double bye, and they're at least going to weed through the worst teams and get the team that's most capable of at least making it competitive. You could look at it that way.
You could, but I mean, at some certain point, if even the people making the structure, that's kind of tipping the hand that they understand that those teams can't win the national championship. So I really don't understand why they even should belong in the field in the first place, because they're just there for a glorified vacation is all they're doing. I mean, they may somehow win one game, but they're not going to make a serious run. None of those teams are, and it's delusional to think so, in my opinion. What and the winner in terms of this new seeding is got to be Notre Dame, right? I mean, they're the clear-cut, undoubtedly best winner of this format change.
Sure, they can be a top 4 seed, and they don't have to play a conference championship game.
Do you think Notre Dame was factored in at all when making this decision, or do you think they were just an afterthought, a beneficiary because of people not caring?
I think it's only logical to apply the rules that they did to Notre Dame. So this is my guess that they were an afterthought, but logically going through the process of now we have non-conference champions that will be in this top 4 position, that Notre Dame now, unlike what we saw last season, that would not have been fair. That would not have made sense. Within this structure, it makes sense to include Notre Dame with other non-conference champions.
I got you. And going forward, I know you don't like auto bids or AQs. Do you think there is any type of world out there going forward when we expand to the playoffs where we couldn't have automatic qualifiers?
I don't. It's just been so heavily publicized and outlined that you got to think that they've gone down that path, and in this 16 team field that's going to take hold in 2026, you have to think that it's almost set. Like if you truly talked to Tony Petiti or Greg Sankey, they're about 98% sure of where this is going to land. And it just needs to be rolled out at the right time, and maybe a few details, and maybe a little bit of massaging here and there, maybe some money to be exchanged to help the Big 12 and the ACC. But that I think it's pretty well set.
Yeah, I would like to see one requirement that you have to play at least one Power 4 non-conference opponent to be eligible to make the postseason.
That's a great point. That's
Because,
a great requirement.
yeah, going forward, like, there's no incentive for any of these high-power matchups. Because if you're Texas and Ohio State and you're good enough to beat Ohio State, then you're good enough to be a top 4 SEC team. Or certainly good enough to be better than every other 8-4 team when you're head-to-head resume-wise, because you've beaten one of the 3 best teams in the country. And the inverse is true for Ohio State. So I think all these games are going to kind of go away as a consequence of having it so predetermined.
Yeah, we have Indiana playing no one. We have, you may have to help me out here because I'm trying to think who's playing. There are typically 5 or 6 teams across the country that play 2 difficult games. Florida State
Clemson.
plays Alabama and Florida. Clemson plays South Carolina and LSU. Yes. So you get, we're even 2 games removed, and we're talking about high caliber Power 4 teams that some of these teams are taking on versus Indiana playing no one. Shoot, about a quarter of the Big Ten plays no one. The Big Ten, shaking my finger at the Big Ten, out of conference scheduling, horrendous. Maryland, horrendous. Rutgers, horrendous. Again, Penn State is playing no one. They're playing Villanova, whoever, a MAC school, and like another FCS team. It's like really atrocious. Penn State, it's embarrassing. It's pathetic.
Right. And do you think if the SEC does go to non-conference games, that could be a concession that's kind of made? We're going to go to non-conference games, but you've got to kind of schedule a big-time non-conference opponent because the SEC does an excellent job of having every team. I'm pretty sure it's statute by the SEC. They have to play at least one Power 4 non-conference opponent.
I don't necessarily know that that's a rule, but it's been executed. I can think, and if it is, it's a very recent rule because there have been SEC teams like Ole Miss and Mississippi State and Arkansas who have not played. Maybe Vanderbilt as well. But anyway, regardless, yes, you're stating what is executed 90-some% of the time by SEC teams. But the counterpoint from the Big Ten and then teams that the conferences that play the 9 games in conference would be, well, they need to make that up by playing an additional non-conference game against the Power 4 because they play one less. But I think if we're going to continue to let these schools schedule their own games outside the conference, then what you just stated would be reasonable. Get the SEC to 9 games and the ACC. There's this focus on the SEC, but the ACC would have to go to 9 games and then just require a Power 4 game from everyone.
Correct. And final thing I'll ask you about in terms of the playoffs is I saw Matt Rule. He was joking on a podcast, but he still threw it out there. And he was joking, but he said a 40-team playoff. He was asked what would help Nebraska out the best, and he said a 40-team college football playoff. I hate that answer because first off, you're bringing into the birth of a 40-team playoff, and second off, it's kind of really selling how bad your program is that you need 40 teams to be eligible to make the college football playoff.
He's basically telling us, well, we're going to continue to suck. We're going to be slightly better because I'm the coach and we're getting a little bit better, but we're still not going to be anything close to what a real playoff team is. So our 7-5 team should make the playoffs because, and we're going to need it expanded that far because we don't really expect to be much better. Yeah, that's a pretty pathetic statement.
Right. I know it's just being hyped out there, but I'm afraid we're going to keep going and going and going along this road. We're going to see a 32-team playoff because, playoffs is the only thing that matters anymore in college football. Is there any point of limit where it would be diminishing returns by expanding the college football playoff?
Well, the top 25 is so ingrained in the college football fans' mind as being a standard of maybe not excellence, but at least competitiveness that, and college sports fans being used to basketball, and because of the ability to play more games and multiple games in a week and a weekend, and the excitement of March Madness. Yeah, I think if we get past 16, that it's going to reek of awkwardness and being a bit of a circus and a clown show past then. Like 32. Like, and just the one thing that college football has been able to maintain above any other sport, and even the NFL playoffs is becoming a little bit much with a lot of 9 and 8 teams, 8 and 9 teams playing in the playoff, is it's been able to maintain a big game component to it. That obviously is it's deteriorating, but still at 16 when considering 70 Power 4 teams and considering 135 teams total, still pretty special. And a big game component. You get to 32 teams, and it's going to be one of those like March Madness kind of deals where you're going to have to choose, do we watch the game on True or do we watch the game on TBS or TNT? We got 3 games going on at the same time. There's no way they're going to be able to play unless they play every night of the week, that they're not going to have multiple games on at the same time.
That's fair. That's very valid. I think, honestly, going to the first round, if they had 2 or 3 games on at the same time, would actually add something because, like, I know last year as a fan, just speaking from experience, like Penn State, SMU, like, I bet you millions of people just decided to turn it off. It's a 21-0 basically in the first 10 minutes of the game. I'd like to see 2 games and then 2 at a time. That way there's, okay, this game isn't doing so well. These lower brand teams, we can turn it on and watch them.
Yeah, you make a good point, and that's maybe not the mentality of the 1995 college football fan, just because of how they grew up, but we're all becoming accustomed to, and a great portion of the college football fandom grew up being tied to multiple screens at the same time. So they're just used to all that stimulation at the same time. And so even if there are 2 really good games going on at the same time, most people have become accustomed to, hey, this is how we enjoy college football for the entirety of the regular season. Why not be watching Penn State and Clemson playing a 24-20 game in the fourth quarter and watching, SMU and Kansas State playing a 31-28 game at the same time? Hey, I can watch both of these at the same time, even if they're good games. And to your point, yes, you get a yawner. And even though I'm old school and I just think it's a playoff game, I want it to be exclusive and an exclusive TV window. And hopefully it's a good game. And hopefully it's not 28-3 in the third quarter and we're just waiting for post game. I think that there would be more people on your side. And certainly as we progress through time, more people on your side can, just because that's how we consume media now.
I got you, Mark, and that's all I got for this evening. Pleasure talking to you.
Thanks to Real. We appreciate everyone here at the Voice of College Football. What you see on the screen right now is vocfb.com. So please check us out right there, and you can register. And the reason you register doesn't cost you a penny, but then you can take part in the forums. And we would love to see all of you in the forums there at vocfb.com. You pick your favorite team. You can you don't have to just stay with your particular team's forum. You can join in all the forums and talk college football across the board, trash talk. And we just really want to build this out to be a haven, a staple, a hub for all of you college football fans. And B-Bean, thank you so much for B-Bean must just copy and paste that baby, which I very much appreciate. So thanks for being here. And B-Bean with his customary The Voice statement with 17 exclamation marks. All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. We've got Adam, our illustrious co-host on the Rutgers channel, joining us tonight.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
Doing fine. How are you?
I'm doing great after returning from Lake Oconee, Georgia for their special prime rib dinner night. It was delicious.
Okay.
And I had a few questions for you. So I still don't understand why you draw a distinction between teams that earn a spot in the playoff and teams that are the best team. Can you define for me what you mean by earning a spot in the playoff?
Okay. I mean it this way. If we watch a college football season, let's say we just focus on the SEC.
Okay.
That much like your narrative that you trumpeted during the last few weeks of the season, getting on the bandwagon of South Carolina at one point, Florida at another point, and pointing out that these are teams that are better than their records. We all, as intelligent college football fans and football consumers, can make judgments about who may be the best teams in the country, or at least better teams than what their records would tell us, because teams change throughout the season. They get better, or they plateau, or maybe some of them get worse. But I think more get better,
Right.
And accelerate their improvement throughout the season. And we also obviously can judge the results versus the schedule. I have long since bemoaned the AP rankings when a team can go to Columbus and play, a top 3 Ohio State team and lose by a touchdown, and they get docked in the rankings for playing an exceptional game versus some other team across the country's defeating Coastal Carolina by 2 touchdowns, and they get a win, and therefore they increase their ranking. My point is that there are objective ways to earn. We play sports games to determine a winner and a loser, and therefore the record has to count to some degree. And the record that leads to conference championship play has to count to some degree.
Okay, so assume you're a college professor and you're teaching a class called Introduction to the Law. You give a midterm exam and a final exam. The students who get the A on the midterm and get the A on the final are the ones who earn the A in the class. But you say to yourself, I know the students who got the B's and the C's are the smarter students. You would still give the A's to the ones that earned it because they got the A's on the 2 exams, correct?
Yes.
Okay. But if you were teaching the exact same course and you were giving a harder midterm and a harder final for one segment of the class, and an easier final and an easier midterm to the other segment, then you couldn't say that the students who got the A on the easier exams earned it. And the analogy I'm making is to schedule strength disparity. With schedule strength disparity, the concept of earning it doesn't work because there's not equity in schedule strength. Does that make sense?
Yep. Oh, you make a decent analogy. I'm not going to give it an A+ analogy since we are handing out letter grades, but I think it's a very solid A- analogy. I think it's a really good one. But then you can also have students that for some reason maybe they elected to take an easier class for whatever reason, but they're brilliant. They are the Arizona State of 2024, and maybe they weren't tested by what we think were the best teams in the country. But once they were then challenged by one of the best teams in the country, maybe the second best team in the country, they were up to the challenge and they acquitted themselves very well and showed that their conference championship was legitimate.
Okay, so last year, the teams with the easier tests who were nonetheless brilliant were Ohio State and Oregon. But
easier tests, how?
Because they had very easy schedules compared to, I would argue, other teams.
You're going to go to the SEC as having better schedules.
Well, regardless of that, I don't think you can make the claim that Boise State and SMU earned their way into the playoff over South Carolina and Ole Miss, even in Alabama, because they were taking easier tests and they were not brilliant by any stretch of the imagination. So that's where I would disagree with you. But again, that's just one point I wanted to, just make for you to think about. The other thing is this. My second point is this. I think the answer is to have fewer playoff teams. I'm 49 years old. I have never in my life seen a college football national champion that was ranked anywhere around 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 that won a national championship. These teams have no chance of winning a national title. And the 4 best teams are going to, one of those 4 best teams, in my view, will almost always win the national championship. So why are we expanding rather than contracting?
Well, you know the
I mean,
answer to that.
okay. I mean, is that just the answer? Money?
About making money.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I think it's almost like any business that produces a product or service is going to charge the highest dollar amount they possibly can while still maintaining a quantity of customers. So they try to hit that balance of how many customers are we going to lose if we raise the cost by $10 versus how many are we going to retain, and we want to hit that perfect buffer of cost versus quantity of patrons. And here I think, if college football wanted to and they wanted to make the most money, obviously they would expand the tournament out to 64, but they want to maintain a look of legitimacy at the same time.
Okay, that's fair. And the last 2 points I'll make are, I think what's happening now is the committee is rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. And what I mean by that is, no matter what they do, they will still capture the teams that should be competing for the national title. They're going to be over-inclusive, but nonetheless, they will capture them. So at the end of the day, there's really no error. Okay? It's not like they're leaving out a team that should be in. So at the end of the day, you're still going to get the 2 best teams playing for the national championship. And the last point I have is, Mark, look, last year I predicted Notre Dame would win the national championship. I have another dark horse prediction for 2025. The USC Trojans.
Whoa!
Will make the playoffs and potentially compete for the national title. But I don't want to take any more of your time. I know you've got other callers.
I've got one other caller, Adam, but I'm curious about 2 things. So let's take a step back, if you have a second, to your previous point about in Ohio State. They played out your point.
Yes,
they were given the toughest road, and it didn't matter. They just blasted everyone.
So the committee got it right. In other words, the method by which they identified the national championship may have been flawed, but they still made sure to include the teams that should be competing. So they can make it 16, 14, 12. At the end of the day, they're still going to identify that locus of teams that absolutely should be playing and competing for the national title. So my point is, it's harmless error.
But we had a team that was super talented, and they caught fire and played to their potential. But other than them, can't you envision seasons in which there are 3 or 4 teams that are so razor close that it will matter where they're seated and what the path is?
Well, I think are you asking 2 different questions, or you're asking razor
close? I am supporting your point. I believe I'm supporting your point by giving you the Ohio State example that regardless of how the deck chairs were assembled, they were just going to blast everybody in their way. And they did. They got the toughest straw, and they still.
Yeah, they're still going to get a first-class cabin on the Titanic. They're not going to be excluded.
But there will be seasons in which there's a closer disparity or razor close discrepancies between the top 3 or 4 teams. So it will matter what the path is.
It'll matter what the path is, but what ultimately matters is that they will be included, is what I'm saying. There's not going to be situations where there's a razor-thin disparity between 12, 13, and 14, and you could say, 13 and 14 would have won the national title. They're still getting it right, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, not that far down the list.
Right. My last comment, like I said, is I went to USC, so I admit there might be some unconscious bias, but looking at the Trojan schedule and looking at that offense this year, I think they're the dark horse, and they're going to go to the playoffs, and they're going to be very competitive. And I think we might see another team coming out of nowhere this year. I just don't know which one that is yet.
Well, if anybody wants to laugh at Adam, let's also consider that before there was a game played last season, he predicted Notre Dame to win the national championship. Did they win it? No, but of course they were the last team standing other than Ohio State. So they were playing on the final night. So that was a very good prediction. And number two, let's also consider that we're going to go through an exercise at some point this summer where we will show that about a third of the teams in college football in the power conferences are going to have a large increase or decrease in wins from last season, at least three. And most of those teams that have that kind of change from season to season fool most of us. They're very difficult to find. And so USC, I could see them going 10-2. They have the talent to do it.
That's what I'm thinking. Then watch out for Auburn. Thanks for listening to me, Mark. Appreciate it. Always good talking to you.
Thanks, Adam. Good to see you.
You too.
Adam hosts our Rutgers show along with our buddy Gabe on, I don't want to screw this up, it's either on Monday or Tuesday night. We've gotten to a point here at the Voice of College Football, and this is a good problem, that I can't remember when all these shows are anymore. I used to be like, okay, well, there's 11 shows and I host 7 of them. So I just have to keep track of the other 4, and I can certainly do that. And I would let you know when all the shows are. But now most of our shows are on Monday and Tuesday night. So Adam can let us know when the Rutgers show is, because it would be great to have everybody that's watching us here tonight join Adam and Gabe for the Rutgers show. All right. Here we go. This should be a good one. We've got our buddy George checking in. George, what's going on?
Hey, good evening, y'all.
Yes.
Hey,
to see
check
you.
this out. Check this out. I got to enlarge in my picture here. Check this shit out. Watch. This is my oldest Gator shirt. I'm saving it to be buried in.
Well, you donned the new gear the other night.
I know. I still got my Lagway jerseys and my baseball jerseys, and I need a basketball jersey now. I got to talk to that Florida State guy that bought me all this stuff. Do you remember I told you my transmission, what's it called? Torque converter went out and it was $1,200 to fix it?
Yes.
It was done in one day, overnight. The next morning they called and said, you can come pick up your car.
That's impressive.
And my kid said, for $1,200, they'll do that. They'll stay there for 3 extra hours to get that shit over with, you know? It was pretty cool. Runs great. Anyway, the next day, my neighbor is drunk and arguing with some guy in a parking lot. This never happens where I live. Never. In 8-9 years, I've never seen nothing like it. And then my neighbor decides to take off and haul ass drunk, and he smashes into the back of my car with his truck. I was watching, you know, as it happened. I'm on the second floor.
That is quite the entertaining story, but we are running a college football show tonight.
I know. Well, the reason I brought it up is he didn't hurt the car. He just took off a little paint on part of it.
Yeah.
And I said, give me $200. I'll call it even. And he gave me $200, and I handed it to my kid, and I said, I'm down to $1,000 because he put that shit on a credit card at $1,200. So I'm paying it down.
What to do with college football?
This doesn't have much to do with college football, but there's an analogy here. Check it out. I saw this on TV. It was on In Depth with Graham Bessinger. You've seen that, right? He's always interviewing somebody. This shit was incredible. The guy's name is Boras. You know Boras? He is a baseball Boras. Boras. Okay.
Oh, Scott Boras?
Yeah.
I know who that is.
He is the man that changed baseball single-handedly. He's a super mega agent, you know?
Yep.
What a good story that was, man. So I guarantee you this is coming to college football. There's somebody like Boras out there sitting there with the answer, ready to implement plan B. We're going to fix this shit. Man, that was good stuff.
I hope if it's actually fixed, but if it's the Scott Boras approach, I don't know if that's going to fix it, or we're going to have a lot of spoiled millionaires playing college football.
I think it's hilarious. San Francisco just gave their quarterback like $265 million for 5 years. Where does this stop? You know, like what are we gonna do?
Money runs out, and the money's not running out. They're finding. You know, you made the comment a couple of weeks ago, George, when you came out of here. You were lining up all the expenses across college football, but then saying, "Where does this money come from?"
It's got to be in the It's in the trillions. If you add it all up, all that shit I was naming, I made a list. I had like 30 things. Where's this money come from? That money come from? It just keeps going and going and going and going. I have no idea. As far as that last guy you had on, the Rutgers guy, I saw Florida play Rutgers in Gainesville in the swamp one year. And I left thinking, Rutgers is a gritty football team. I respect Rutgers so much because I saw that game. They just don't give up.
They still got their asses kicked, though, is what you're telling us.
Right. We kicked their ass, but they put up a fight. What they need is more money, like Oregon. Go get yourself a $20 million quarterback. Hey, can you save up your NIL money for 4 years and get a $100 million team? Just lose for 3 years and then go get a $100 million football team.
Somebody brought that up the other day, but I do not believe that that's going to be accepted. No.
Okay. Oh, I got a good story for you. My brother's been on hospice for 1.5 years, right? And the other day, his ex-wife, 4 daughters, and his son was in Qatar, that country that gave Trump an airplane. He came home. They all went there. They got 4 suites at the Hampton Inn, where it's free buffets and everything. That's a big deal in Mississippi, where he's at, when that many people come to town spending money. He thought he was going to be cremated when he died. Those kids bought him 2 burial sites for him and his wife. I had to write it down. It's so much shit. Caskets, a priest. They paid to have him put on ice when he dies so the kid can fly back from Qatar again. Gravestones with intricate engraving and all this nice, beautiful stuff on it. The grave diggers had to be paid up front. They're already paid. They don't work on pay me later. It just goes on and on and on. But isn't that sweet? In one day, bam, everything's taken care of. And now he doesn't sound so sick anymore. It lifted him up. He started eating again. And
I still can't get over 1.5 years in hospice. I thought
I know
the hospice that pretty much they're counting the days.
He went to the hospital the other day, and it really pissed off the hospice people because the second he did that, they're not getting paid no more. So he has to come back home and get on hospice again, but they lost a week or two's pay. And he said they actually called me up and yelled at me. Oh, what did you go to the hospital for? And he's like, they said, you have a do not revive clause in your contract. And he said, that's for after I'm dead, you dumbasses. Not while I'm still alive. He still has a good, healthy attitude. Isn't that some shit? He said he would bother to report him if he cared, but he said he's not even going to bother. Oh, man, I know 1.5 years on hospice, and the reason he's making it so long is he gets free morphine. He's like, I could do this shit forever, except when he stops eating after a while. That morphine shit makes you not want to eat. Anyway.
Yeah, it's not pretty.
Somebody told me today it's 100 days until the Gators kick off. I guess it's less for some people. It's coming. It's getting
George,
closer.
I marvel at your persistence in the Miami show. You show up in the Miami show and you take on everyone.
It's just such a natural thing for me. I don't know why. I can mess with Florida State just a tiny little bit. It's hard to mess with someone that wins 2 games. I can mess with Miami. They won 10. They're fair game. And I used to feel sorry for them until they beat us last year. Now I'm copping an attitude again. I don't like them anymore.
Folks watching us tonight, if you could care less about Miami and don't give a damn about Florida football, still show up for our Miami show and just check out the comments and the fights between George and like 18 different Miami people. And you had somebody going the other night. I forget the guy. I think it was Muhammad.
Couple of them. Muhammad and some other guy.
That they get so pissed off, they get to a point where they're just resigned to basically copy and paste their same insults over and over.
Right. They're kind of new guys. All the old guys know me and like me. They're kind of new. They don't realize who I am, that I'm practically one of them, you know? And they're all getting angry and I'm just joking around. They're getting serious. I'm like, whoa, the fuck. Yeah, everybody come to Mark's Miami channel and watch me beat these people down week after week after week, year round. They can't outthink me, outjoke me. They're not more sarcastic. I win every time. Except those guys keep going, "You're a dumbass, George." You know, I don't have nothing for them.
I'm gonna go on a campaign about this. Our Miami show is Wednesday at 7 Eastern. On the Miami channel.
You know, Mark, I haven't seen a good movie in so many years. I just don't like any of the new movies. But I saw one the other day called The Return. Have you heard of this? It stars Ralph Fiennes. You know Ralph Fiennes?
Yes.
That's a good flick, man. You'll like that one. I think it's on Showtime, but I got it through Paramount or something. Some of those channels swap over, you know. So if you see that movie, The Return, you'll like it.
Actually,
to everybody.
B-Bean, by the way, I host the Miami show. Anyway, I actually went to the theater a couple weeks ago for the first time in forever and saw Warfare.
Was that good?
It's a little intense. Especially for the person I was with. I don't know what they were expecting to see, but I got exactly what I was expecting. They came out of that and they were like, wow, that's a little intense. We were watching a war movie.
It's called Warfare, huh?
Warfare. You know, it's basically taking you moment by moment through a unit that's trying to take over a block in Afghanistan, I believe. Yeah. Pretty intense.
That'd probably be more interesting if it would have been more interesting if they would have set that in Chicago, trying to take over a block in Chicago. And you're outmanned. They got better weapons than you do, you know.
I would love to see some real documentaries about what's going on in that city.
I know.
Ridiculous.
It's enough to make you forget about Gary, Indiana. You know, like what the fuck is going on in Chicago? Makes Gary, Indiana look like somewhere to go for vacation. You know, the hell out of Chicago for a minute.
All right, George, we are going to get on with the college football discussion. Do you have anything else for us?
This guy in the chat said Chicago. The guy in the chat said Chicago-stan. I can't pronounce his name. Peanut Butter Posse, maybe. I don't know. I think that's it. Hey, I made 2 quiches today, deep dish quiches. So I ain't got to cook for a couple of days. And I want you to know, if you don't have cream and you're doing that, I used a stick of butter instead of cream. I just melted the butter, mixed it with the milk, and there's my cream. You follow me?
Yeah.
So it's all kind of ways around stuff.
I've got a buddy nothing but clean food, nothing processed.
Exactly.
Tough to do.
We could do a show some night on ingredients. I got these health bars in there. I get them from different places. I don't buy them, maybe like a food bank or something. And it's like healthy this and that. And I flip over the little wrapper and read it. And there's like 72 ingredients in micro print. Shit, I don't even. None of this is legal. It's impossible, man. Do you know there's trisodium phosphate in Cheerios and cereals? You can't even legally get that to clean your freaking bathroom anymore, but it's still in your cereal. You know, what? Never mind. Let's just stop before I get in
All
trouble.
you have to do is look at the Apple Jacks and the Fruit Loops that the kids consume here, and what it looks like versus what you see in the rest of the world. They just throw
Yeah,
the dye
it's
in it.
illegal. It's all illegal in every other country. They will not let you sell that to their population. China don't even do that to their people. Only here. We're unique. I'm amazed any of us are still standing, quite frankly. The only reason we're still standing is because we used to go outside and play. We ran around and laughed and had fun with our friends. But this next generation doesn't have that. They're sitting in a chair, staring at a cell phone, and they're not running and playing. So they're just building up all these chemicals. I'm worried about the future of mankind. It'll be
George.
Yeah, somewhere like Turkmenistan or somewhere will be the last people alive because they didn't have none of this shit. They just raised their own chickens and grew their own vegetables. They'll be the last ones at the end of the world. Somewhere remote, somewhere. Oh well, good for them.
Just had to throw somebody in timeout. They can't have us discuss these kind of things. All right, George. I do appreciate you being
love you
here.
guys.
And we've got a Florida channel too, George.
I go there. I like those guys.
All right. Very good.
I don't hit every show, but I'm there most of them.
All right, George.
American Spirit. American Spirit Organic protecting me from the chemtrails. I'll hack them up tomorrow. All right. Love you guys.
Right, thanks, man.
See you later. Bye.
We keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. We got our buddy Jason. Jason stopping by. Jason, what's going on tonight?
What's up, man?
It's been a while. How are you?
Yeah, has been a while. Good. How are you doing?
I am doing just fine. Got a good looking setup there.
Thank you.
I like it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Like it.
Been working on the background a little bit. Got the it's starting to look okay, pretty good. I was looking at this. Did I just read correctly that the group of 5 may not get in? It's straight seeding.
Well, the top 5 conference champions are guaranteed. So that is going to get
So that
we just read through the story probably before you jumped on.
Well,
so that was included.
I'm reading
still the top 5
right now. Yeah. Okay. Because it looks like I read something in here that said Norman. Yeah. Let's see. Something. The group of 4. Wait. Something about that it could hurt the group of 5. And man, where did I just see that? The decision comes with a financial compromise. No, that's not it. Let's see. They gained all the necessary unanimity for the change, despite it potentially adversely impacting the Big 12, ACC, and Group of 6 leagues. So, what is the adverse impact? I just found out about it, whenever I popped onto your show. So,
yeah, that's a great question because that doesn't make too much sense. Because when are 2 group of 5s going to make it? So I was alluding to the point in the article that says, all right, where it's see the top paragraph there, the top sentence, the 5 highest ranked conference champions will still be guaranteed spots in the 12-team field.
Okay, is that Dellinger's?
This is coming from Heather Dinich.
Okay. So what I'm reading here, it says in the current structure, the top 4 seeds in the playoff are The management committee, the 10 FBS conference commissioners, and Notre Dame's athletic director approved a move during a call Thursday. They gained the necessity. Well, hold on. I just saw something that made me think I'm not sure. voting unanimously to place teams based directly on the selection committee's rankings and not by conference championships. Multiple sources tell Yahoo Sports. So it's saying how they're seeded 1 to 12 is what Dellinger's saying.
Yes, but yeah, it's going to be 1 through 12. And so you're not going to see a Boise State go from number 9 to number 3, and Arizona State last year from 12 to 4.
Got it. Okay.
As conference champions. But it's basically most seasons, unless you've got a situation like last year, which was kind of an aberration with Boise State being as good as they were, where let's say Tulane's the best group of 5 and they're 10-2 and they're ranked number 21 in the country. If they're the top group of 5 and a conference champion, they're going to be elevated. And so number 12 in the country is going to get the boot.
Okay.
Yeah, it's still the top group of 5 is still going to make it.
Okay.
And then I don't know if you heard our first call, but obviously this is a Band-Aid. This is for 1 year. Then we're going to go to 16 in 2026, Jason. So our first caller was saying that there's a thought out there. One of the top writers, it wasn't Dellinger, but one of those guys, Thamel or one of those guys, was proposing that there's actually, I think it was Stuart Mandel, that instead of just playing 1 versus 16, 2 versus 15, etc., that they're going to play this like play-in 13, 16, 14, 15, and they're going to have double buys for the top 4, and that's going to be a mess. But that's possible.
I just saw something about that too, where they were saying that, well, there's definitely going to be a fight coming. And you could kind of tell that with the ACC meetings last week, right? That they were like, no, we're not. We should get at least 3. I just want to say, even though, I mean, Oklahoma's an SEC school, and I do believe that the SEC is the best conference. I think that the Big 12 is right there, or the Big 10 is right there underneath them.
Yeah.
I don't like the idea of having auto selections.
Oh, I don't either.
I think it's bad for college football, because I think that if we just actually go to strength of schedule and you could put, parameters together that allows the strength of schedule. You could go on strength of schedule. There's plenty of different models out there that judges it that would allow you to get the best 12. I even feel like you could go to some kind of mixture of the BCS computers and a committee and probably do better than what they're doing and still get your 4 or 5 anyways. You know what I mean? I think you're going to do it with 16 teams.
So for me, Jason, while the seedings are important, the number of teams involved, whether that's 12 or 16, all those determinations, right, conference champions, all that's important. Right. The missing portion in all of this is how we get to that point, and it's all about the schedule. The scheduling in college football need to be fixed. Like we were talking probably before you jumped on, there are going to be teams in the Power 4 that play 2 very difficult non-conference games. Clemson's playing LSU and South Carolina. Right. USC last year played Notre Dame and LSU. Florida State's playing Florida and Alabama.
Yes.
Florida State. And then you got teams running around like Rutgers, and Penn State even is playing no one. Villanova, Rhode Island, and an FCS team, just a pathetic schedule. And that needs to be addressed.
It does. Well, it's just like, Matt Rule, I was saying in there in the chat earlier, he's curled up in a ball somewhere thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to have to go ahead and play these games against the SEC and everybody else. Bro, what is wrong with that guy? What has happened to Matt Rule? I don't know what happened to this guy.
Yeah, that he's making comments that we need to expand to 40 teams so my team can get in.
Yeah, but I mean, just not wanting to. I like the one thing I like about it is I want to see the SEC go to 9. I'd like to see that. Then they're talking about adding that, Big 10 SEC game.
Yeah.
Anyway, now my thing would be, I don't want to see the Notre Dame USC game go away.
No.
So I think that and Notre Dame's a different deal. They can play who they want to play or whatever, and they make enough money that they're not going to go to a conference. I don't see that coming anytime soon. But why not allow, rather than saying, okay, yeah, you have to play an SEC team every year, Lincoln and USC, continue the 95-year, rivalry with Notre Dame. As long as you do something, I mean, because they're a power school, they make as much money off of their NBC deal as what either of the other conferences are making. They're basically,
Yes. Is there nothing sacred, Jason, in the sport anymore? We're going to have Notre Dame and USC go by the wayside.
This is what I hate. This is what I hate about it. I think that this is where you start screwing it up. This is where you start screwing it up, is that you're getting more and more of these rivalry games are going by the wayside. And I mean, that's what really matters. I mean, college football is built on hate and rivalry. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's what
Absolutely.
it is.
I made the same statement.
And I'm thinking, this is what it's for.
Yeah. What you just said is exactly what I said to somebody like 2 nights ago that called up and then was complaining. And I said, the first thing that comes to mind when I think college football, rivalries and hate.
Yeah.
First thing.
When Matt Rule's saying that, no way, why would I want to play Oklahoma? Because it's Oklahoma and Nebraska. That's why.
Yes.
We want to see that again. I mean, it used to be great. And I feel like when they went away, now, first off, I think there's a lot of reasons that Nebraska fell away. They lost their pipeline to Texas because they got away from that conference, all that kind of stuff. But because you're not going to be able to, you can't compete with Michigan and Ohio State in the Midwest for recruiting. You're just not going to do it. But I also think that, and I said the same thing about Oklahoma State, not wanting to play Oklahoma anymore. It's going to screw with their competition, their competitive spirit. When you don't play that game anymore that you have to get up for, you're going to get the best game from these guys. I think it messes with who you are as a program. I think it messes with your identity and everything else. And I don't think you can take away competition. Not to get in here and start trashing Lincoln Riley. I don't know that it's just about Lincoln Riley. It sounds like it has something to do with Jen Cohen and everything else. In the end, you can't get rid of that game and expect for people. I can't imagine that anybody in Southern California that's an SC fan is okay with that idea of not playing that game anymore.
I hope not. And my answer to the Notre Dame situation, Jason, and I might be wrong, is I don't blame Notre Dame. Notre Dame's just looking out for the best interest of Notre Dame. Of course. But until we have a commissioner or a governing body that's ruling college football, nobody's going to force Notre Dame to do anything.
No, unless, and that's the thing, I have the coach on my show and he's a Notre Dame fan. And he says it right every time. Unless somebody tells us we can't compete for a national championship, unless we get into a conference, we're not getting into a conference because they don't have to. Literally they're making plenty of money to compete right where they are. I think they're still the most complete team in the country right now. I don't know that I don't think there's a true favorite coming into the year to win the national championship. I think that they're right up there, Yeah. I think that they're right up there. They didn't lose enough to where it's going to hurt them on either side of the ball. I think what they gain in either one of the quarterbacks that they could play is a passer, which is what they kind of needed. And they still have arguably the best backfield in the country. I think they're going to be fine. But, yeah, I don't know, man. I just feel like this is the further we get away from rivalries, I think interest goes down. But I also think what I was saying earlier, doing 4-4, I don't love it. I think it's a bad idea because I think you're going to get 4 more times than you don't anyway, especially if you're going to 16 teams. You're going to get 4 anyway. Just if you go.
You are.
Just by going off the strength of schedule. And you can fix the strength of schedule part. Like you said, you're going to have to work on the scheduling.
Yeah, I've worked through the seasons, and the SEC and the Big Ten is going to hit that mark most of the time, but it shouldn't be forced. It shouldn't be automatic. If you trust this committee to rank the teams correctly, then the team should have to earn it, and there not be some requirement that the SEC and the Big Ten get more teams than everybody else. If they're truly that good, then they're going to get more teams in.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think if you look at you start looking at SMU last year, they didn't need to be in. They didn't play anybody. The two decent teams that they played beat them.
Yeah.
And so, Dabo sat up there on the podium and saying, "Oh, that team deserves to be in the playoff." Why? Because they gave you a game. It was ridiculous. And then Penn State, they got wow. They didn't win any of their, again, don't beat Ohio State and pretty much get, slapped around a little bit. And then can't beat, but they didn't have to play. They did finally beat Michigan, I guess, but they didn't have to play Oregon until the conference championship game.
There was no Penn State Michigan game last year.
There wasn't a Penn State Michigan game last year?
They did not play.
Sure that there was. Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, there you go. So I guess their best win would have been USC on the road then.
Yes.
During the season.
Yeah.
Illinois, maybe?
Illinois. Yeah.
But
record-wise, Illinois.
Yeah. But so they lose to Oregon, and what do they get for it? They get rewarded with SMU and then Boise State, while Oregon gets to wait. But then what are they waiting on? The buzzsaw from Ohio State. It was terrible. I get why they're doing what they're doing as far as the straight seeding. I like the idea of the straight seeding for sure. I don't know if it sticks with this though.
Yeah, well, I think we're just 1 year away from 16.
Right. Well, yeah. What do you foresee? Is it going to stay with straight seeding though when you get to 16, or what are they going to do? Because now the SEC and the Big Ten don't have to ask anybody's thoughts on it. They just get to do what they want.
Yeah, they do. And I think 16. So once we get to 16, Jason, what are we looking at? Maybe I'm trying to think if we're going to have AQs beyond the conference champions. Is it going to be enough spots for the Big Ten and the SEC to? Well, I think it's going to be what 4-4-2-2-1-3.
4-4-2-2-1
with 3 at large. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, which ironically, you bring up BYU. The Big 12 only had 1 last year. If there was a 12-team playoff with that, or 16 with that, BYU would have gotten.
And they had to do tiebreakers for their conference championship. They had 4 teams tied at the top. But they were 9-3. Nobody had hit 10 wins.
10-2.
Oh, no, there were 10-2. That's right.
Actually, 3 of them were 10-2.
3 were 10-2, and then you had
Colorado
at 9-3. That's right. Okay.
All right, Jason, I'm up against it.
Do you think that they end up? Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask you, do you think that they end up? They don't really have anything to stand on. I know that the ACC and Big 12 are talking about making it 4-4-3-3.
Yes.
And then the 1.
I don't know how they can push that across the finish line.
They don't have
any leverage. You know what, to me, Jason, tells us more than anything about college sports and the inequity right now. And for as much as Brett Yormark, and I think he's doing a great job, he has to lie through his teeth sometimes, but that's his job, and say everything's hunky-dory and everything's great and we're on the same playing field as the Big Ten and the SEC. He's got to say those things. But
he turned off the whistle in the damn Bedlam game the last time.
Think about this. Every time through the history of these conferences, every time they've made an agreement, they have divided everything equally up until now. And now I forget the percentages. I think the Big Ten and the SEC get 29%, and the other two get 13%.
It's not close. I think that's, and this is where you start looking. If you're the Big Ten, if you're the Big 12 and the ACC, do you at some point do you say, why do I do this? Why even bother?
Well, they have to be
You kind of
connected
have
to
to,
those
but I
two.
mean, but how are you going to compete? How are you going to compete? You're already making less anyway.
Yeah.
It's,
But if
I think that you're going to, I've been saying it a lot on my show. If you think it looks different today than it ever has, wait a minute. Just wait a minute, because it's not going to get.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be unrecognizable from here on out.
Yeah.
Not putting it back in the tube. Hey, thanks for having me on, man. It's good
Hey,
talking.
thank you, Jason. Good to see you, man.
See you later.
Have a good one. All right, let's take our last two calls here. We got David Greenshield dropping by, Dr.
Yes.
Buckeye.
Yeah. Hey, Mark. Wanted to get into rivalries with you. But first, I wanted to address what you were talking about the other day on your show, your daily show, about the time slot for the Ohio State-Texas game.
Yeah.
And, maybe because I hearken back to the 05 and 06 games.
Yes.
And I was such a big fan. I mean, there's something to, I was just talking about this on the Ohio State show, so I'm going to kind of echo what I said there to you right now, which is, I don't know, I love the atmosphere at the shoe in the evening. I think it's awesome. And that 05 Texas-Ohio State game had like a magic to it. It did. I'm just saying. And I thought the setting was great
I
in the
agree.
evening. You had a really good night for football. Musburger had his fastball still. So did Danielson before he got terrible at announcing football.
Yep.
And but that was 20 years ago. So I mean, I don't know, Mark. I just think there is something to an evening game. I know you're not a big Gus Johnson fan, and you're not trying to carry his water, but I don't know, Mark. Fowler, Herbie at night in the shoe. Why is that not appealing? Or why does that not matter to you?
It would not be those two.
Okay.
It's a Fox game.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, I mean, so ABC could, because of the SEC thing, could not do that then, right? Well, the SEC though ABC still has the SEC though.
Okay, so the designation for non-conference games goes to the home team and the home team's network.
Okay, that's right. Okay. Got it.
So that's how that's determined. Okay, the only thing I was saying in all
Sure.
of that, and I knew there would be people that would misconstrue it, and I get it because it sounds rather stark, is that I'm not saying that people should not have an opinion. And if you want a night game for Ohio State, Texas, I totally get it. I understand. That's
Well, I
what
just
you
want to
prefer.
stipulate.
I'm
Mark,
not saying you specifically.
No,
I'm saying
I just have a difference of opinion, Mark. That's all I'm saying. Yeah.
no. I'm simply saying that I don't understand, nor do I agree with people who say that objectively night games are better than day games. No, in your opinion, based on your preference.
Right.
I also push back until proven otherwise, and nobody's going to prove it because nobody does the legwork to do this. You cannot prove that really any team is more successful playing night games at home than day games.
Right.
Everybody assumes that, or a lot of people assume that, but it's not been proven. Somebody put the number 17-6 for Ohio State at night since 2012. I said 17-6 for Ohio State is not a good record.
Yeah, but I think that there is, and I said this on the Ohio State podcast. Urban used to like it for recruiting purposes. He had thought that was like an atmosphere that would really draw recruits to Ohio State because of the atmosphere, at night, big game, and that would be a really good recruiting tool. I don't know, Mark. I just think that, and maybe I'm off here, and maybe I'm being nostalgic a little bit here too, Mark. But I just think an evening atmosphere suits a really big time college football game. And I'm not saying we're both old school, Mark. We remember when these games were at noon or were at 3:30. And I would never change the game at noon. But maybe because it's a non-conference game, I'm more apt to say an evening atmosphere suits it better too.
Again, that's your opinion, and
Yeah,
I respect your
yeah.
opinion. I don't feel that way.
Okay.
I don't care when the game's played. They can play at 8 in the morning. Well, that's a
Okay.
little early for me.
Right,
But
right.
maybe at 9, 10 in the morning, it makes no difference to me. They can play at midnight. It
Mhm.
makes no difference to me. I don't care when these games are played. I really don't. And based on the Fox contract, we should all be used to this at this point. They've had this contract since 2017. That means that this is going to be the 9th year
Mhm.
that Fox has had Big Ten football,
Yep.
and they put all the best games at noon.
Right, right. Because Team Up North played Texas at noon last year. Right.
Now, I will say one thing that has made it a bit different, this now only being the second year. So we've only lived under 1 year of Fox having exclusive Big Ten rights.
Mhm.
So you would every other year see an Ohio State Penn State game on ABC and Michigan and Penn State on ABC,
Mhm.
and therefore it would be a night game or a 3:30 game. So now we are getting the full throttle onslaught of Fox moving everything of value to the noon time slot.
Right. Dude, I always thought there was something, and I'm not going to carry the SEC's water, but I think that ESPN's had something cooking, and this was before ESPN became indebted to the SEC. I'm talking 90s, early 2000s, when ESPN had Franklin and Godfrey doing those
Oh yeah.
evening SEC games on ESPN. I don't know, there was like a magic to that atmosphere, wasn't there, Mark?
Oh,
I mean, you were
absolutely. I
there, so
loved those.
you would know.
Yes. Oh, I loved those Franklin and Gottfried games, LSU and Georgia and
Yes.
Florida, Tennessee, and whomever else. Absolutely. Those were great. And then those were usually I may be forgetting my pecking order, but probably the second best SEC game of the day, because the best one
Yeah.
would be Jim Nance. At that point, it was Jim Nance calling the games with like Todd Blackledge
Well, that was
on
before Vern
CBS.
took over? Yeah, I think that was
Yeah.
before Vern took over,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know, Mark. I mean, you've worked in this market, so you know it better than I do on like what's sellable to the public as far as time slots and as far as that goes. And I'm not if they do it at noon, they do it at noon. So be it. I mean, it's just a thought, maybe a preference that I have for certain non-conference games. I think there's something to it about it being at night. Just
Well,
just a
there,
preference.
there's also an argument to take your side on things that maybe Fox's approach has become not necessarily outdated, but that they have caught up with ESPN and ABC.
Hmm.
They were playing from behind 9 years ago. So
Right.
their
Good
perspective
point.
was they own ABC and ESPN own primetime football. We do not want to compete with that. We're not going to be competing with the Alabama LSU games of every week, and Alabama and Tennessee, and fill in the teams from the top half of the SEC that Fox would compete with. So they made the logical choice. Okay, we're going to fall in line with Ohio State, Michigan,
Hmm.
and make this, we're going to own, and 8 or 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a Big Ten matchup. The other 1 or 2 is going to be a Big 12 matchup. And we're going to, and of course they had Oklahoma and Texas at the time, but we're going to swing. And instead of trying to bang heads by throwing Ohio State, Penn State at Alabama, LSU, we're going to throw it at noon and we're going to make this a big deal.
Right.
I mean, that's when Fox wasn't considered well, of course, they were a major player in the game, but they were significantly behind ABC, ESPN at the time. But now they're considered equals, and maybe they could throw those kind of games at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, there's certain rivalry games though that do fit the noon time slot. I mean, obviously, I would still say the game. I think Texas Oklahoma fits well in the noon time slot too.
Yeah,
By the way,
they usually play at that time, and
yeah,
consider that's an 11 a.m.
right,
local time game. But they do play 3:30 at times, so they're not begrudging to that noon. Ohio State, Michigan, that's it.
yeah, with the exception of 1 year,
Yeah,
right,
exactly. And that's been 19 years ago now,
right,
unbelievably.
yeah,
But yeah, everything else, shoot, Florida and Florida State, they play all over the map on any network, and it is amazing. And this is another confirmation of how immense this rivalry is compared to all the other ones.
right,
Throw out any game at me, anybody in the chat, throw out any rivalry, and I will tell you that the game's been played at noon, at 3:30, at 7:30. It's been played on Friday. It's been played on CBS. It's been played on ESPN. It's been Alabama Auburn's been played on ESPN. It's been played on ABC. It's been on CBS. It's been in every time slot, gets thrown all over the place.
right,
Um, and with the down years that the combination of Florida and Florida State have had, shoot, they've thrown them on Friday night. They've thrown them here and
yeah,
there.
yeah,
Not Ohio State and Michigan.
no, I
Nope.
mean, you've seen it from a television rating standpoint, though, Mark. I mean, every
Oh,
year, you know where the game
amazing.
ranks. I
Yeah.
mean, okay. By the way, great segue, though, Mark. Great segue because we're talking about rivalries. Um, one of the first things, or one of the conversations that we had, and we got to it after the national championship. By the way, Scum fans, we are the national champions. I don't know if you've heard. I just want you to know that. But I get where they're coming from. There's something to this rivalry. And one of the things you said to me after the national championship game, because of the playoff, is it's diminished. Those were your words, Mark. After the national championship game between us, you said that the game is diminished. And I got to be honest with you, Mark. It's never going to be diminished to me. I'll just say it. Bottom line.
Well, okay. So I want to be here again is another statement that needs clarification that I
I'm going to allow
made,
you to do it. Go ahead.
because I will never dictate to people how they should feel about anything. That's not my place. We as individuals can feel and hold reverence or a value for any particular sport or game in any way that we want. And for anyone who would come on here and say Ohio State and Michigan is the game and the most important game and is even more important than the national championship game, that's your opinion. That's the value that you place in that game. So I'm not, who am I to take that away from someone? But I'm saying objectively, it's obviously been diminished. Ohio State just won a national championship and lost that game.
Right.
That was virtually impossible forever,
Right.
and less possible in the last 10 years or so. Now they could have pulled it off in 2022. So we
Right.
saw a precursor
Yes.
to where we live now. I actually, David, you're bringing up me making that statement after Ohio State won the national championship. I actually said that like hours after the game.
Right. You
that they
did.
lost. I said this team can pull it together, and it seems like it's a disaster right now, and this loss is unfathomable as a 23-point favorite, but there's still a there's still a championship to win.
Well, I mean, and listen, just in the pecking order, this is for the obvious reason as an Ohio State fan, and maybe some Ohio State fans can do this, but I cannot put this above 02 or 14. There is no ranking for me that can justify this championship above 02 or 14? I would say mainly for that reason, Mark. I don't know if I've already told you that or given you the pecking order for that and said that, but as far as the three championships are concerned, but just for that, I have to still keep it that way.
Okay.
I
So
have to be true to
again,
myself that way. I'm
sure.
just, I
So
got to be true to
again,
myself.
I can't tell you how to feel, but I would also say that it's logical what you're saying. It's not just a feeling. To me, it's logical because now if either the 02 or the 14 championships would have been won in like 2019 LSU style or 2020 Alabama style, where it seemed as though, okay, the writing's on the wall and it's
Mhm.
inevitable and that's where we're headed. No,
Right.
both of those were improbable championships as
Mhm.
well. But obviously they came with a Michigan win
Right.
and, for whomever still cares, a Big Ten championship, as opposed to this obviously had none of the other earmarkings of a successful season except for that they got the opportunity to run through again what is an astonishing gauntlet.
No, it
But I
is.
don't think it's appreciated that we have never seen a team in the history of college football beat number, well, they obviously elevated to the eventual number one, but Oregon was number one. So they beat the eventual number 2, 3, 4, 5, and then
Yep.
8 and 10.
Right. Right. Well,
That's insane.
they actually beat was Oregon. I thought was the number one team in the
Well,
country.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Right.
But
Yeah.
they took their spot in
Right.
the
Mhm.
eventual poll. So Oregon finished whatever they finished, 2 or 3.
Right.
Um, and yeah, 02 and 14. Obviously, those for
Well,
many people at various parts of the season, it did not seem like a likelihood that those teams were going to win national championships.
well, listen, I mean, first of all, they weren't an eighth seed to begin with, Mark. Nobody,
No,
even after the debacle, thought this was the eighth best team in the country.
no.
Nobody did. Anybody with half a brain that watched college football would have said, oh, that's the eighth best team in the country. I mean, let's just be real about it here. They weren't. And so, I mean, getting that seeding didn't make sense from and we even talked about them that after the game because once the playoff seeding came out that there's a really good case they should have been ranked ahead of Penn State.
Absolutely.
That
I
was
thought I thought I made that case pretty ironclad.
yeah, you did.
Obviously, the head-to-head, the record is virtually the same: 11 and 2, 10 and
Mm,
2. The head-to-head on the road,
mhm.
and then the performance against Oregon compared to Penn State's performance against Oregon.
I mean, I tell you what though, the one thing about the rivalries though, I guess with the 12 team and as we move into even a more expanded playoff, Mark, is what would really become more meaningful, I guess, is if we're going to live in a playoff world, is if we get the rematch in the playoffs.
Oh yeah,
That's really where things, then become, really interesting. And
the
even
first.
more likely to happen, especially in a 16 team playoff, maybe.
Yep, sure it is. The first time we get a rematch of any mammoth rivalry, but
Hmm.
especially that one, will be. I think it'll be fascinating the first time we get it because I thought and wanted. I must have been out of my mind, but I actually wanted it in '06.
Mm.
Uh,
Were you advocating? Wish I would have known Mark Rogers in '06. Mark Rogers would have been out there advocating for the rematch, by the way.
yeah, I was advocating for Michigan being the number 2 team in the country. I did not believe that Florida,
Wow.
for as much as I'm a conference championship guy,
Yeah, that surprises me.
yeah, I wanted to see those 2 teams play. Well, obviously the national championship game was in Tempe, but Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So my to finish my point, it was going
Sure.
to be that the first time that happens, I think it will just be beyond description in terms of the heightened just intensity and among the fan bases. But if that happens 3 times in 10 or 12 years, then I think it's going to
Well,
lose something.
we were basically a couple of one missed field goal and maybe a big play from
Yeah.
having that rematch happen in 22.
Yeah. That would have been
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah.
Which would have been the highest rated college football game maybe of all time.
And now that we know what happened afterwards, meaning Michigan won it all in 23 and Ohio State won it all in 24, think we could have had 3 consecutive Ohio State Michigan national champions.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Well, just think, well, remember 2010 to 2013, you almost had 4 straight Auburn, Alabama national champions
Yes.
if Jameis Winston doesn't
Oh.
pull off that last
Mhm.
second win.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, like all the rivalries, though. I mean, Auburn, Alabama. I wonder, how those folks feel about that rivalry, especially now in a 12-team playoff world. Because that's like the second biggest, rivalry probably in college football.
I guess the difference between Ohio State, Michigan, and everyone else is that those are the most likely teams. Okay, first of all, they play the final game of the season.
Right.
So it's not like it's a rematch from the Alabama LSU game in October that they're going to play in the SEC championship game. It's the likelihood, and it's going to happen at some point here, that they play 2 weeks in a row. I don't think we've had that in the history of conference championship games, which makes total sense because we've
Right.
always had divisions in all these
That's right.
conferences. So you're not playing a non-division game for your last game of the season. So I just think we're going to run into a really odd situation that we're not going to like, where one of the teams, if not both teams, already have secured spots in the Big Ten championship game.
Mm-hmm.
Or more likely, one of them has and one of them has not.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to question the incentive. Yeah.
Does this continue to make Mark Rogers long for a different college football world?
Yeah, it does.
I know
Yeah.
it does. Yeah. I mean, listen, I, as an Ohio State fan, have to understand that a 12-team playoff was my salvation last year. I do. I mean, I
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
to.
And that, and again, I'm not telling you how to think
Right.
and to place this the third among the 3 this century, but to some people, I bet this was the one that they savor the most because of how bad it was after the game,
Right.
and that they turned it around and captured it.
Yeah. Listen, I had a 50-minute call on Sunday on your show to prove it. So, I mean, you don't have to tell me anything, Mark.
If I had if I had the staff here, I would be pulling all sorts of former shows and to pull all sorts of clips of our conversations, because I would love to hear them. Because I remember making the obvious point. I'm not saying I was some kind of, although I did pick them to win the national, as you did before
Yes,
the
I did.
season. We
Yeah.
both picked it, and
Yeah.
I picked it before the playoff. I picked every playoff game correctly, so I
Mhm.
did predict a Ohio State win over Notre Dame in the national championship game before the playoffs started. But I'm sitting here kind of conflicted right after, that week. Let's not take right after the game, but that next week, because I kept thinking, I believe that this is the best team in the country
Yeah.
and they should win this playoff. But now they've been given the toughest path.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, the Tennessee game was the game. That's
Yeah.
what we were going to find out, what
Yeah.
mettle that team was, how
Yeah.
they were mentally ready to, are they going
Sure.
to be ready to play, after that debacle?
Yeah.
and they were, and they
It
just
was, in a sense, with a better outcome. It reminded me of the Georgia game. I didn't know how that team was going to respond.
right. I still think the Georgia game was about a quarterback though having like a generational performance though.
True.
Like
Yeah.
the Tennessee game was like an all around performance.
Yeah.
So that's how I take it.
But they were playing a better team.
Oh, that's true. Good
Yeah.
point. Good
Yeah.
point. And for that game to be close, he had to have that kind of performance for Ohio State to have a chance to win.
Yeah.
So
I watched that game maybe about 6 weeks ago.
oh, you do the same thing I do. I just watch replay a bunch of Ohio State games in my off season.
I watch a lot of NFL games in my off season.
What are you going back and watching 70s Dallas Cowboys games, Mark?
I actually watched the last.
Just
Well, I
joking.
do. Yes, I watch more Dallas Cowboys games than anything on YouTube.
Yeah.
In sports, but I also watched strange things like a couple weeks ago, just because it popped up on my YouTube screen, and then I am a sucker for history. I watched the Kansas City Chiefs 1969 playoff run.
Oh wow, yeah. Well, I just on NFL Network watched they had the two great Raiders playoff games from the 70s, the Sea of Hands catch,
Oh
and then
yeah,
the Ghost to the Post where Dave Casper beat
yes,
Burt
against the
Jones and the
Colts.
Baltimore
Yeah,
Colts.
that was one of the first Sports Illustrateds I remember seeing.
Okay.
It was a shot of Dave Casper with the ball coming over his head.
Yeah, poor Burt Jones. Tough loss for those Baltimore
Yeah,
Colts.
they
Yeah,
had really good teams.
yeah, yeah. There's always those teams that get caught up in the mix, Mark, in the NFL. You know, they have their run, and then that was it. So
The one matchup we were deprived of in the 70s and 80s was a Cowboys Raiders Super Bowl.
right,
And
right.
it's astonishing how many times that one of them reached the Super Bowl and the other lost a conference championship game, that they just missed each other so many times.
Yeah, we've been deprived of a lot of great Super Bowls, you know, of all time. I always say one of the best of all time would have been '98 Denver versus Minnesota,
Sure.
which should have been the Super Bowl that year.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
hey, love the what are we doing Thursdays now, Mark? Or how's the schedule working there, my friend?
Well, I was out at the beach today, so we just kicked back to whenever. But
What are you
yeah,
working
we're
on a
going to do a
tan or
late night,
something there, Mark? Or
do a
what?
late night call-in show every week. What's that?
Were you working on a tan?
Unintentionally, I was. Yes.
Got that farmer's tan going, Mark. It's looking good.
Okay.
All
Well,
right,
it was a
man.
little bit more than a farmer's tan today, because it was beaten down pretty well. So,
All right, my friend. Well, good show tonight.
all right, Dave. Good to see you, man.
Take care.
You too. All right, let's take our last call of the night. And we do appreciate your contributions here at the Voice of College Football. So you do have the super chat available. And I certainly want to let everyone know that we do not expect you in any way to give financially, but we do appreciate it to keep us going here at the Voice of College Football. So if it's some kind of financial hardship for you, please don't consider it. But if you do have a few bucks to help support what we do here at the Voice of College Football, we do like to keep the lights on. All right. We got Drew stopping by. Drew, what's going on?
Can you hear me fine?
Yes. Thank you for your patience.
My God, my patience. I don't know. For whatever reason, every time I call in, it's right behind that guy. And I got to hear this OSU love fest between the two of you. You should get room already. I don't know. But my God, that was painful. Let me just say that.
Well, it was informative. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, I would probably see that too if I were a big OSU fan, but I'm not. So that was just nothing but a bunch of, it was painful. But with that said, I want to address some of the things he said, just like the last time I called in after him.
Sure. Okay.
And some of the things, of course, that you said. So first of all, let's talk about rivals.
Yep.
We have to acknowledge that as we expand the playoff, rivalries and conference championships will have less value. Period.
Yes. Absolutely.
Like that's just a fact of the matter.
conference championship games already have been diminished.
have less in value.
Yes.
Right. Now, with all that said, that's easy for an OSU fan to say. Because if I'm a Michigan fan,
Yep.
I'm not going to say that rivalry is everything.
Absolutely.
And so that's kind of a one-sided view. And I just want to, kind of depends on which side of the coin. Like me as a Texas fan, I would have said 2 years ago, our last year in the Big 12, that rivalries wasn't that big a deal because, yeah, sure, we got beat by OU, but we won the Big 12 the last year that the Big 12 that we were in the Big 12, right? So, my point is everybody has a biased view on all of these things, as I know that you know.
Absolutely.
And so, just pointing that out.
The only difference with me, Drew, is that I do my very best to be unbiased, but I will never argue with anyone or make a statement that I'm unbiased. That doesn't exist. You would have to be a robot to not be biased. Now, I do my damnedest to filter it out, but of course I'm biased. I love the state of Ohio. So I'm not even talking about Ohio State. I'm making a point here because I was on a back and forth on Twitter yesterday. I am a Buckeye through and through, and I don't mean that from an Ohio State sense. I'm talking about growing up in the state of Ohio, being a Buckeye. And there was a statement made by one of our hosts that Ohio is one of the top 3 states in terms of high school football and high school football development. And I'm like, what is going on? Ohio is nowhere close a top 3
I've
state
actually heard that, though.
In recruiting.
I don't know if that's true.
No.
I know Texas, California, and Florida, but I've heard people say it. I heard people say it many times.
Talking about.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree with that.
And I stated right out of the gate, I said, I am a true Ohioan. I will forever be associated with being an Ohioan, but I have to tell it like it is. And I spit out, Drew, a zillion facts to back up the point that Ohio is still a strong high school football playing state, but it's nowhere close to the top 3.
No, it's not the top 3.
8,
yeah, it's not
something like
3.
that.
Yeah, something like that. Correct.
So I do my best to be, and I say to our Michigan fans here. So we got, for example, like Moose is in the chat right now and other Michigan fans. I will state this: your first initial point, I back that up completely. If Ohio State did not compete for national championships for the next X number of years, but started beating Michigan again, the fallback default for an Ohio State fan would be, we beat Michigan, we beat Michigan, we beat Michigan, we own the rivalry. I do not begrudge any Michigan fan for throwing that in the face of Ohio State fans. Of course, they've won 4 consecutive games. Absolutely, they should.
Well, and we came from a world where that game and the OU Texas game kind of decided who would move on and had a chance that season.
Usually,
I say, usually. So,
sure.
So that those games really did have serious consequences that can, obviously be overcome. And quite frankly, when they expanded the playoff to 4, it even had an effect. So I just think, for sure, that's a fact. But from a smack talking standpoint on the internet, that rivalry still means everything.
Again, depending on perspective, my point is that in yesteryear, that rivalry meant everything subjectively and objectively. Now it means everything for whomever subjectively wants it to still mean everything, but it objectively doesn't mean everything.
Yeah, but yesteryear, we didn't have this robust smack talking internet, where in this year you still can't beat Michigan, can you?
Well, when I say
they're still your daddy, aren't they? They still own you. They're your daddy. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, like, yeah, sure, back in those days, yeah, it did mean everything. But
If we wanna-
now, these days, it's going to get thrown in your face one way or the other. So, in a
But-
way, it still
but if you-
matters greatly.
But if you want to continue down this rabbit hole, Drew,
Sure.
it's also up to the person who's throwing the trash talk in that direction to determine the parameters of the argument. Meaning, I don't know how many Michigan fans say 0-4, 0-4, 0-4. Well, who's 0-4? 0-4 refers to nothing except for 4 consecutive losses. Ryan Day's not 0-4. Jim Harbaugh's not 4-0. He's 3-5, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody's 0-4. Nobody's 4-0. They just frame 4-0. And my
Okay,
response
so
is,
this is you go ahead and finish that thought.
so either we argue historically or we argue right this second. Because
Okay,
if
ahead.
somebody wants to throw out 4-0, 4-0, or 0-4, you know what my response is? 8-4. 8-4. I choose to count the last 12. If you're going to count the last 4, I have every right to count the last 12 and say Ohio State 8-4. Like what?
Okay, hold on. This is great because this is perfectly segueing into a system that I devised. It's called the Drew to Longhorn rivalry system.
Whoa.
And you devise it on certain tier levels. So number one, the highest of the tier level is who, of course, now I'm a Texas fan, so yeah, this is biased, but who owns the overall rivalry? That's the number one. You always have that. The number two is who won the last year. Like, we're talking from a smack talk perspective, and you can argue with me on these. Number three is who's owned the last 4 years. And I say 4 because typically it's 4 years between a new team and an old team. And then after that, you can go back to, like, say, 20 years or something of that nature. But from my perspective, what matters the most is who's got the overall record, then who won the very last year, then who's won the last 4 years, and then who's won the last, say, 20, 25 years. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's reasonable. I don't totally agree with it. No system is perfect. So that certainly isn't, but it's reasonable. It makes sense. Let me add this. First of all, I levied this challenge to not just Michigan fans, but Ohio State fans. And anyone who's intellectually honest will have to admit that. Admit what I'm about to state. If we took Ohio State's history, all of its scores, every bit of fact concerning Ohio State football, and we gave that to Michigan, and we took all of Michigan's history and we gave that to Ohio State, guess what would happen, Drew? All the Ohio State fans that argue the Ohio State positions would then be arguing all the Michigan positions. And all the Michigan fans that currently argue all the Michigan facts and all the leads that Michigan has would be arguing all of Ohio State's positions. And that
100%.
truly determines the statement that everybody is so biased, it's ridiculous.
Okay, but here's my question. If you did an anonymous poll
Yeah.
of those fans and
Yes.
said you can trade your history with their history, what do you think that poll would come out?
Oh, nobody's trading anybody's history because
No,
Michigan
I'm saying
fans are going
in
to
an
attach
anonymous.
themselves. Oh, Michigan fans are going to attach themselves to the points that make their history look better, and Ohio State fans are going to attach themselves to the points in history that make them look better.
Yeah, it's a hypothetical, and it's probably impossible for the certain. Okay, so let me go back to
And
mine.
those
then.
are even enough to where it's not like comparing Alabama and Auburn, because there's Auburn fans have no leg to stand on. Their numbers are minuscule compared to Alabama. So this is the only rivalry of this magnitude where it's so even historically that we can have this kind of debate. We can't have this with any other rivalry.
We can have this with OU Texas all day.
Well, Oklahoma's got a
All
pretty
day.
significant advantage.
No, I mean, not in the long run. This is my point.
What's
This is
the
literally my
series
point.
all time between Oklahoma and Texas?
It's like Texas is ahead, I don't know, by 10 games or something.
But
That's what I'm
Oklahoma,
saying. This is why I bring this up,
won way
because
more Big
like,
12 championships and
well,
better
right, but
winning
that's in the
percentage
last
all
20
time.
years. But if you look in the last 4 years, I would say the last 4 years are more relevant than the last 20 years. And I would say the overall record is more relevant than both of those.
Okay. Let me pose this, Drew. Okay, because I've put Michigan fans, again, who are being intellectually honest, I've put them on their heels on this one. So I'm looking up the Texas-Oklahoma series. What's our...
And while you do that, real quick, just to say, if I could trade Texas's history with
Yes.
Oklahoma, just literally reverse them. If I could
Yep.
do that,
Yep.
that's a tough call, but I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't
Okay.
do it because I
Yeah.
can still say I got the overall record, and for the last 4 years we got you. But maybe I
Okay.
would have said different. Maybe I would have said different 5 years ago for sure.
Okay. So if you're familiar, Drew, with the Ohio State-Michigan series, Michigan got off to a huge lead because they played football earlier. So they first of all, they won the first 16 games in the series. And, you know, they won the first game like 100-0. I think 86-0. Like, there was no comparison between the two schools for a long, long time. And another thing that Michigan fans don't like to hear is that Michigan has more Big Ten championships than Ohio State. However, it's kind of difficult to win a conference championship when you're not in the conference. Since Ohio State joined the Big Ten, Ohio State has more Big Ten championships than Michigan.
Well, we got to set that aside because people go in and out of conferences. Set that aside.
Why do you set that aside? No.
Because people go in and out of conferences. Texas went in the Southwest Conference. They went in and out.
You come up with a percentage of how many championships you won for the years that
yeah, see, but you're doing what OU fans do. You're finding a way to make your team better.
No, not at all.
Yes, you are.
What if Maryland had won the Big Ten championship every year they've been in the Big Ten? They've only been in the Big Ten for 12 years. You don't think that would be substantial?
Yeah, of course. That's an interesting conversation. Yes.
Well,
yes, of course.
How do you compare that with Michigan's 45 Big Ten championships playing back into the early 1900s?
Well, and once again, this goes back to my overarching point. Who has the overall record? I actually don't know.
Not when you're playing. No.
I'm saying if I Googled it, what would Google tell me?
Oh, Michigan owns the series against Ohio State.
Oh, there you have it.
No, you don't have it.
You can't twist it.
Yes, you can. It's not.
Well, you can. You can.
Providing context to numbers.
You can, but that's not going to hold water against a Michigan person.
Context.
I don't disagree that context matters. I definitely agree. And
absolutely,
by the way, go for it. Make the argument. But that's not going to stop Michigan people from saying we own the record.
Of course it doesn't. Of course it doesn't.
And that goes back to my overarching tier.
I would do the same thing if I was a Michigan fan.
Okay, and that's my and that goes back to my point. Would you trade what you have to be able to say that?
No, it's not. Ohio State is such a more dominant football history than Michigan. It's not even debatable.
I just don't know what they would say to that.
Who's got the best winning percentage?
I think they would debate that, to be honest with you.
Who's got the best winning percentage of all time?
I don't know. They would just
Ohio State
literally, once again, goes back to my tier system. They would literally refer to, we beat you more times than you've beat me.
I'm not talking about between those two teams. I'm talking about in the history of college football, who is the best winning percentage? Ohio State does.
Okay, I assume that's true, but set that aside. Once again, that goes back to my tier system.
It's my first point.
Yeah, but my point is who won between the two the most is the highest of the tiers.
And then point number two, if we want to go to the games between these two teams.
Now, to be intellectually honest, of course, it's easy for me to say, being a Texas fan, having won more, the highest of the tier than OU. I totally acknowledge that makes.
Yeah.
I'm going to. Okay. Yeah, I get it.
Honest here.
I get it.
The game of football was not truly the game of football until 1914 when there was a forward pass allowed. Like, is that really football in Did Rutgers actually win a national championship in 1869? They claim a national championship. They have a national championship. Can you tell me, Drew, what Rutgers' record was in 1869?
It doesn't matter. They won a national championship, so therefore they got a natty that got the flag on the wall.
National championship.
And trust me, I know context matters. I hate it. I hate it.
Rutgers' record in 1869 was 1-1, and they're the national champion.
It doesn't matter. They're in the national.
It does matter.
Does Google tell me they're
national championship?
What does Google?
I don't care what Google says. I Google stuff all the time and prove it wrong. AI is wrong.
Well, yes, of course. Yes, I don't disagree with that. But if we're going to start making those nuanced arguments, I can start making all kinds of arguments about how I don't think we lost the SEC championship against Georgia.
Well, no, you can't change.
Yes, I can. I can literally walk you through the game and be like, see that bad call right there? We both agree that's a bad call, right? That's a bad call. We both agree? Okay, good.
Well,
okay, so if that bad call never happens, therefore what?
Okay.
Yeah, therefore Texas wins, right? Right.
Results. I am not talking about changing results. That's ridiculous. If we're going to change results, I can make Indiana the greatest football team of all time.
Well, I know, but you can't make that argument and then say, but they're only 1-1.
Nothing's off the table now. If you want to say you can change results.
I know, but you're trying to change the results that they didn't win the Natty. They did.
No, they didn't. They claimed a national championship. That's what's wrong with this sport. It's not like counting Super Bowls. Schools can just claim national championships.
I can only go off of what the overarching powers that be, Google, whoever they are. I can only go off of what they tell me.
No, you can't. Drew, you can listen to me, who
okay, I got you.
Numbers.
Okay, I hear you. You know what? I trust you more than I trust them.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's move on for a moment because I know you're probably okay. OSU Texas at noon game. I think it's an amazing thing. I think it's a great thing. I think it's the best thing. I think people are crazy overreacting. Okay. Think about this. It's like Christmas Day, baby. How excited are we to wake up to Christmas Day on college football day? Now, I do have a complaint. I kind of don't like the fact that they're not playing a cupcake game before they play each other, just one.
Yep.
But neither here nor there. That's not happening. So with all that said, to me, I think this is the best absolute spot that you could have put this game. I think it's going to be amazing. It's electric. Everybody's going to be excited to wake up and watch college football. And if you had any other game, don't get me wrong, the Clemson LSU game, people will be excited too. But I think they absolutely nailed it in the way that they put these teams in the schedule that they did.
I am certainly fine with it myself. Yes.
Like, I'm going to be so excited. I don't even know if it's going to, I'll be like a kid at Christmas, man. I won't even be able to go to sleep.
But you're a neutral fan for this game. You're you're not a neutral fan. I'm sorry.
No.
You want to see Texas go to Ohio State and play a day game. So here's the Ohio State argument. And I don't care about it. I don't care when this game's played. They could play at midnight. I'm fine. But you understand the Ohio State fans' argument. It's that there's
a lot of folks say that night games.
Yes, that it's tougher to win on the road at night. That's never been proven.
Do we have any like actual statistics? Because exactly. I know my team got their ass whooped last year at night against Georgia.
Exactly.
So I mean, I know my team doesn't win at night at home for sure. I can go. My team doesn't do well at night at all at home.
No, we were talking about this on our Ohio State show a couple of days ago, Drew, and I had an Ohio State fan pull out some statistic that Ohio State's 17-6 at night since 2012. And I said, do you know what you're telling me? That Ohio State plays poorly at night. A 17-6 record.
That's terrible for Ohio State.
Yeah, it's only a 73% winning percentage. If they did that all the time, everybody in the chat would be outraged. So
yeah, it kind of, in a way, I almost feel like it juices the home team up almost a little. I mean, it's hard to say. It's hard to say.
It is hard to say. It's impossible to say. Yeah.
So, from my perspective, in this case, I am not coming from a biased place. I might very well wish, because I want the Longhorns to win, would I rather them play the noon game or would I rather them play the late game? Boy, that's a tough call for me. I don't know, but I do like the fact that they're playing the noon game because I'm going to be like a kid at Christmas and I get to wake up. How exciting is that?
Okay, Drew, I'm going to believe that you're being legitimate with your claim about wanting this game time if you agree that when they play in Austin, that they should also play at 11 a.m. Central Time.
100%. 100%. My team loses at night at home. I mean, we got a really cool drone show. I don't know if you've heard about it, but we lose. So I 100% want my team playing the noon game at home. So, all right, we'll move on from that. Notre Dame. Let me ask you this hypothetically. Let's say Notre Dame, through their cupcake, in my opinion, schedule, makes it to the playoffs for the next 2 or 3 years, ends up let's just for the sake of this hypothetical, squeaking off a natty in some way. So they got a natty and they get a playoff berth every year for let's say 3 years in a row. I personally think that would destroy the conference structure that we have today. I think other teams like my team and your team and all these other teams would look at this easy path that Notre Dame gets where they don't got to split no money. And every year they get this easy path to the playoffs. And they would be like, why am I doing this? So one way or another, either Notre Dame's going to lose and not make it to the playoffs, or they're going to single-handedly break up the structure of conferences as we know it.
Well, we've already had a team win a national championship this past year that not only did not win its conference, it also didn't even play in the conference championship game. But otherwise, I would agree with you, Drew, that if we had a long line of 5 or 6 straight national champions who also had to play an extra game in a conference championship game, and then Notre Dame came along and didn't have to play that game and played a soft schedule, sure.
I think it's even simpler than that. I think it's even like a narrative, just the fact that OSU had to play a Big Ten schedule and Notre Dame did not. And therefore, if Notre Dame makes it for several years in a row and teams like OSU doesn't make it, people are going to look at that. On the narrative alone, even if it's not even fair, just on the narrative alone.
Sure. Well, Drew, I'm going to stick up for Notre Dame to a certain extent here, even though I hate that they're not playing in a conference, and I think they should be. They have played easier schedules since they signed this ACC agreement. Basically, they have supplanted Big Ten teams for ACC teams, and their schedule has hit the skids. Plus, teams that they regularly play, USC, Stanford in particular, have gone from being juggernauts to marginal, or in Stanford's case, deplorable. So a lot of teams that they've regularly skipped, because up until this ACC contract, I used to rank the schedule every year, and Notre Dame used to have put together one of the toughest schedules in college football. They used to. And I don't think that their scheduling approach has really changed much. It's just that Stanford sucks, USC's not as good, and some of the best teams in the ACC are not as good as they used to be, Miami, Florida State, that they play on a regular basis because of this ACC contract.
Well, coming from Texas, okay, I'm not going to be very sensitive to any of that because everybody used to say us in the Big 12 had this really easy schedule. And I didn't believe that at the time. We were playing, TCU and Baylor at the time when these guys were good. And, so these things there's ebbs and flows. People have perceptions of things. Okay, Stanford was a juggernaut at one time. Maybe they're not now. I don't even go that far down the road. I go, why are they the only ones? Who do they think they are?
That's I agree with you. I've been talking about that for years and years and years, that Notre Dame should be in a conference. And now that they're the only, it was one thing when it was Notre Dame, BYU, and then you had a bunch of other just,
Sure.
nothing
Sprinkled.
teams. But now it's been whittled down to basically Notre Dame, zero, and that's it.
Not only whittled down to just Notre Dame, they've got a seat at the negotiating table on their
Yes,
own. Like
that's ridiculous.
it's ridiculous. And the only argument is that, well, of course they're going to do that. That's in their best interest. Well, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, we can all fucking do that.
I don't blame them. They're not the problem. College football is the problem.
Yeah, somebody needs to stand up. Somebody needs to grow a pair. And we can move on to the USC thing. First of all, I don't remember that being this great rivalry. I just didn't. I didn't.
USC and Notre Dame?
I just didn't. Here's what's so funny is when I talk to people from the north, they think they don't know anything about the OU Texas rivalry. They're just like, oh yeah, wasn't that a game that just happened? Like they don't know. And by the way, I didn't really watch the quote the game really until maybe 10 years ago or something. So like we were all so separated for so long. Now the internet's changed all that. But my point is like no, I didn't know that was some big rivalry. I really didn't.
I've known.
I mean, I would have watched it because I was always. I would have watched. Yeah, but you're in that world. You're in that world.
No, Drew. I may just be a different sort, but when I dive into something, I dive into it. So when I was 8 or 9 years old, I knew that USC, UCLA, which I was a zillion miles away from USC and UCLA growing up in Ohio, but I knew USC and UCLA was a big deal, and Oklahoma and Texas was a big deal, and Oklahoma and Nebraska was a big deal, et cetera, et cetera. I knew that they were all a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that they quote unquote were. I mean, I'm not saying I didn't know it existed. I'm just saying I didn't know that it had the pedigree that we're all of a sudden going, this thing. Like, I had no idea this was like a 94-year thing that they've done. And by the way, I think if you polled the people that listen to your show, which are really high level college football fans, they wouldn't have known that.
They wouldn't have known that Notre Dame and USC is a huge rivalry.
Is a huge rivalry going on to the degree, for the amount of years that I guess. I mean, I don't know, what is it, like 100 years almost now or something?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I had no idea.
No, I can't answer that for them.
Okay, well, fair enough. All right, we can move on from that.
I think we can move on for the night.
Okay, that sounds good.
Calling, Drew.
Sounds
Thanks
good.
for being here, man.
Very good. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
All right. 2:32 in the books. So we appreciate y'all being here at the Voice of College Football. Again, we get together Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern time, but our time on Friday, am I going to do a show at 4 p.m. because we got our On the Move show with Leanne Herring. Please like and subscribe, folks. And I see there's like 140 people watching, but hardly anybody's on YouTube. So most of these people on Twitter, Facebook, etc., unfortunately. So if you're watching us on Twitter or Facebook, please join us on YouTube. That's where you should find us. And again, it's the On the Move show, and we're going to show up at 8:30 Eastern on Friday with Leanne Herring, and we're going to take your calls. And so we will see you then. Appreciate you stopping by. Great show. Thanks for contributing, and we will see you next time.